I interviewed my father. He is 77 years old. He suffered a stroke 3 years ago, but his recovery has been remarkable. My dad and I have a somewhat strained relationship. I moved out of my parents' house, very much against my father's wishes, when I was 18. We didn't speak for several years after that. When my grandfather on my mother's side passed away, my sister Sandy called and asked me to come to the services. I did, and a gradual thaw has been in place ever since. Where did you grow up? I grew up outside of Joliet. Well, it's inside of Joliet now. Where's that? It's on Hobolt Road, but it was Reardon Road then, because my father farmed the land on the eastern side of it, and his father farmed the land on the west. Where JJC is now? That was a bog where JJC is now. My grandfather's farm was north of that. I grew up across the road where those houses are now. What were the major events that shaped that time? There was only one. I was born in 1927 and the Depression started in 29. We were poor anyway, but the Depression affected everybody. Of course, I couldn't remember a time without the Depression. It was just normal to us. Who were your best friends? My brothers were my only friends after I stopped going to school. What did you do together? We used to go down to the rail yard at the J. You know where that is, where Route 6 goes over all those tracks down by Berlinski's? Yes, you walked there? What did you do there? We stole coal. If it was wintertime, we jumped into hopper cars and stuffed our pockets with it. Wasn't it guarded? Yes. What did the guards do? They stole coal too. Why did you stop going to school? By 39, I was old enough to work on the farm. Since I was the oldest, it was my job. But by then, my grandpa had died. His brother sold that land, and in 41, your grandpa sold the farm where I grew up and went to work at the arsenal. What did you do? Whatever I could get paid for. I was a steel puddler, a rivet catcher, a tinner. Mostly I was a welder. One time I was laid off, so I just started at one end of Collins Street and went into every business. Need any help? No? Okay. Need any help? No? Okay. Until somebody said yes. Were you ever in the military? Yes. I was 18 in 1945, so I joined the Army. Nobody knew how long the war in the Pacific would take. Your Uncle Ray lied about his age and joined too. What did you do in the Army? They trained me to be a weatherman. They sorted us alphabetical, so there were 7 Tom Reardons from all over the country in my class. I thought you fixed airplanes in Texas during the war. I did. I finished meteorology school and they sent me down to Texas. When I got there, the sergeant asked me what I was trained to do. I said they trained me to be a weatherman. He said, no, we already got too many weathermen. What did you do before the war? I said I was a welder, so they sent me to weld in airplanes. Do you remember where you were when Pearl Harbor was attacked? No. You have to remember, if you weren't there, nobody heard about it till the papers came out the next day. I don't think the Joliet paper ran it till the day after that. I probably heard it on somebody's radio before I saw it in the paper. Do you remember where you were when Kennedy was shot? Which one? John F. Let's see. November 22nd, 1963. I sure wasn't in Texas. Your mother went into labor with your sister Sandy. She called an ambulance. Hospital called the Union Hall. They called out to the job. The foreman called up to the bridge I was working on, said that your mother was in labor and Kennedy had been shot. I about fell in the river. Dad, Sandy was born on Christmas Eve. I know. The labor stopped. I don't think the Kennedy news had anything to do with that. With Braxton Hicks contractions? What? Never mind. How about when Armstrong and Aldrin landed on the moon? July 20, 1969. I was watching it on TV in the living room in the house on 13th Street. They came out early and you were the only one in reach. So your mother grabbed you and sat you down in front of it. Do you remember that? Funny, you know, I remember watching the rocket take off, but I don't remember the landing. I was only 4. How does your reaction to any of the landmark events of the past compare with September 11th? Dad? Okay, any advice you want to offer the younger generation that you haven't already? or any advice that bears repeating for any reason? You keep asking about all these big events from the news, but you're asking the wrong questions. It's not what life is. Life is all the little unremembered stuff that happens in between. Of everything I've told you today, you probably don't recognize that the most important things were the story about going door to door to find a job and your mother going into labor. You can't do much about the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor or Kennedy or the moon. That's in God's hands. If you're smart, you'll put the rest of the stuff in God's hands too. I know I could get you talking again if I asked for advice. Still don't want to talk about September 11th? No. Okay. My father suffered a stroke on September 11th, 2001. He was walking home from church. My parents go every morning. When he turned gray and sat down right on the sidewalk. My father would stand at a mattress convention. I'm sure it's the first time he ever sat on a sidewalk. Fortunately, my mother is a nurse. She recognized what was happening. By the time the planes hit, Dad was firmly ensconced in the hospital. The end of the interview reminded me of all this, and I dare say colors my own responses to the same questions I asked my father. The rest of the piece is my responses to those same questions. So if you want to hear the rest of it, it's all in the book. Thank you.